Hello, what is up, everybody? My name is Mario Pichardo. Welcome to the next episode of Methods, a podcast where we focus on keeping it real, telling the truth, and focus on growth. So, today, you know, one of the things that I struggle with the most at present is being consistent. And consistency is really what we're talking about is habits, building stronger, better ways of being able to do things in a way that you're able to get a consistent result. You're able to get the same result day in and day out. But a big part of consistency is discipline, because there's always kind of a part of our day where, we'd rather go and do this or go and do that. And we kind of have to learn to fight the urge to not do this and not do that, but to sit down and chug away at whatever it is that is in front of us. We all know in our minds those things that we should be doing. And it's like, okay, but I'm not going to go do that because I want to go do X, Y, and Z, or I don't feel like it, or I'll do it tomorrow, or it's too hard, or something similar. And the only way that I found to get through that sense of lack of consistency, that sense of not knowing, or it's not about not knowing, it's about for whatever reason you don't follow through, like you just don't do it. And you kind of come back and you ask yourself, well, what is it that's causing me to have this problem where I can't just do this thing that I've been trying to do for so long? It always comes back to being disciplined. And you know what? The fact of the matter is that there isn't a shortcut. Discipline, consistency, it's a character trait. It's something that you build by consistently doing something. It's a habit. And I can sit here and I can tell you, okay, this is how you build a habit. This is how you change a habit. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. But I think that for the most part, if you're sitting here and you're listening to this, you know that really what you need to do is just make sure that you go and do the thing consistently, whether you want to do it or whether you don't want to do it. I want to write a book, so I know that every day I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write 100 words. The hardest part for you is going to be sitting down, because once you get started, it's easy from there. I mean, it's not really, hard. There's not really this thing, this like kind of whole process that you have to go through before you get started. You just got to get started. You just got to put pen to paper. And then you go from there. And then it's like, okay, well, I put pen to paper. Now let me go do the next thing. Now let me go do the next thing. But you start somewhere. And then from that starting position, you kind of go along and you kind of hit different and other paths, different ways to kind of develop and grow in what you're trying to do. And I think that it's a lot of kind of being in that mode, being in that kind of way of not knowing kind of what the next step is for you, necessarily in terms of, well, what does my reality now look like? And that's fine. But it's more a matter of kind of just stepping in and stepping forward and moving and keeping things going. For example, when I started this podcast, I wasn't saying, oh, what am I going to do for this podcast? I just kind of did it, because a lot of what doing something new is doing it and then calibrating, iterating on the process of what you're getting, and then saying, okay, well, can I make this better? Do I know how I can make this better? Are there ways, things, and processes that I can use to add in small things? Because a lot of what growth is the small incremental changes on a base on that first attempt. You think about it like, okay, well, I want to be a great drawer. Well, I'm not going to sit here and draw, I'm not just going to study all the great artists and then expect when I sit down to draw a masterpiece. What I do expect is to struggle, to get my butt kicked, to have to work really, really hard for that. But I do it because I know that intrinsically that's what has to be done in order for me to reach whatever the X goal that I have set for myself is. And that's really it. A lot of life is about just kind of doing something. So I could sit here and I could tell you, oh, well, you need to, whatever action you're trying to take, you have to make yourself feel good about it. These are the best practices. But in all honesty, the biggest factor on whether you're going to be able to do anything is, can I discipline myself to do this consistently? And can I make sure that I'm not kind of messing this up? In that I'm kind of like, there's days when I don't, but then there's days when I do, but then there's days when I don't. And, before you know it, if I wanted to get skinny, I'm even fatter. And if I wanted to start a business, now I'm even worse off than I was before. So, and we all have things that we're trying to do. But it's the same for everything. And it's hard too, man, because you think about you wanting to become the person that you want to be, assuming that whatever blueprint you have for your life is still available. It's still on the table. It's hard, man. Getting yourself to be motivated enough to do something. And that's where I think a lot of people kind of mess it up. Whatever you're trying to do, there's always going to be a time where you just don't want to do it. You just don't want to do it. So some people who are sitting like, oh, let me watch this, listen to this podcast, that'll motivate me. Let me read 20 books on the subject. It's not about the reading. It helps. But let me put it this way. You learn a lot more from actually, exerting effort into doing the thing. And then kind of then reading about it and learning how it should work, because now you have a base point of which to jump off of to calibrate where you are. So I think, and I say this because I kind of read a lot more than I did anything. And what I found was that I had a lot of issues with getting off the ground. In fact, I think that it was harder for me to do anything because I would have to read everything about it. And then when I sat down to do it, I'd constantly be trying to remember and think about all the things that I'd read and put it all together into some kind of framework that I could use. And that for me was just like, whoa, this is like too much. This is like a lot. And I don't really know what to do with all of this. Like, and so in that way, it's hard. It's hard for sure. Um, it's difficult, but it's it's something to do. So, uh, you kind of mix the two together in that way, and that's really how you get from point A to point B. There's not really a another way. It's at the end of the day, it's about taking action and then comparing where the progress that you've made to where you want to be, um, making adjustments if you need to make adjustments, but it's really the learning process. And then the next time you do it a little bit better. And that's typically how it goes. Now, if you're someone who's talented, you jump a couple pegs. So instead of being 1% better, sometimes you're 10%, 15%, 50% better. And so some people get for some people what can take a month can take them a week to do. So, but the one thing for me, and it kind of, as I'm saying this, I'm also kind of speaking to myself. The way to really make a breakthrough in your own life, there isn't a scheme, there isn't a plan, there isn't a. You can make those things and they can help you, but really at the root of it all, if you sit down and you take action every day, and you calibrate yourself. And by that, I mean you look at where you want to go. Am I getting closer? Am I making progress? Are there some ways I could do this better next time? And you just keep doing that each time you make action. Okay, that was a little bit better. Okay, that was a little bit worse. Okay, let me try doing it this way now. Tweak it this way. Maybe this will make it a little bit more. And then, okay, well, that was even worse. Okay, well, let me now go back because clearly this new technique or thing I'm trying is wrong. And that's really what, and it's funny because, this one idea or this one principle is of just disciplining yourself and building that as a character trait is what holds so many people back from feeling happy about their lives, from feeling engaged with life. And it's really just the fact that they're not kind of taking action and being consistent in that. Because if they were, oh, well, people would be so much happier. People would be incredibly happy, much happier than they are now because they're doing something about how they feel. They're not letting all of these things kind of just stack up in their minds, and they're and letting that affect their perception of their character, of who they are. So as I kind of share this, in a way I'm speaking to myself, because no one's perfect. There's always things that we fall short of in some way, and that's going to happen. That's a given. But what we can do about it is make sure that we're recalibrating ourselves. Are we still on track? Because if we sit back and we kind of don't do anything and we kind of like procrastinate and let other things kind of happen, that's where you start to see the years go by and you don't make it. You end up not making it. You end up in a situation that you hate. You seem to be even further away from your goal than you wanted to be. And it just becomes scary and hard. And listen, life's hard as it is. So any little kind of help or advantage you can give yourself is would be well appreciated, right? The other thing that I kind of want to talk about, now we'll do a 180 and go to the other end. I've been watching the trends of this kind of growth in um, left wing socialism and communism in Western culture and Western society. And there's a couple of things that I want to point out that I think that people really ought to notice, people really ought to see, and pay attention to. One of them is the fact that this censorship is happening all over the West. This push for things like hate speech, this push for uh, the ending of free speech, this push for abortion rights, this push for um, open borders, all of this left wing ideology. It's interesting. It's all being pushed at the same time and towards the same. Uh, it's all being pushed toward at the same time, and in all of these different countries at the same time. It's happening in America at the same time that it's happening in Britain, at the same time that it's happening in Australia, and the same time it's happening to Europe, and the same time it's happening to virtually every other uh, Western civilization that we know of. And you might say, okay, but we have the internet, so these ideas are going to spread. Yeah, but even so, I mean, we're talking about cultures that are unique in areas that are thousands of miles away. And the internet is a fairly recent invention, to such a degree that we're really the generation, or the generation after us is the generation that's growing up that was really born in on these things. Okay, so it's born already having them. So it's not that old yet. But what we're seeing is that the younger people are getting a hold of technology and stuff like that. But the proliferation of this socialist Marxist ideology is spreading like wildfire, and it's spreading to every single known developed civilization, a developed economic country in Western society. And so the one thing that I notice is that I don't think it's coincidental, because it doesn't make sense to me that Finland and Norway and Sweden and Switzerland and France and Italy and Britain and Ireland and the United States and Canada and XYZ continue all had the same idea roughly around the same time, that all of a sudden we need to become countries that are super cool and super nice to immigrants, countries that are super that believe in a further removal of free speech, so on and so forth. Not that a lot of these other countries have free speech. I mean, America is really the free speech country, but to see this kind of ideology be pushed in the United States and other countries is, I think, a cause for concern. It's kind of one of those things that's like, okay, but what about what the people who live there want? So to me, in my opinion, it's coordinated. I think it's obviously coordinated by the elites of these respective countries. And so clearly, what I see is kind of a ganging up between nations, all for the idea of, okay, let's put people down, or let's suck up as much control from the general populations as we possibly can. And that's clearly what's happening. That's what's happening today. And if you look at the trajectory, they're trying to remove free speech in all of these countries. They're trying to take away gun rights. They're trying to divide these countries, like this idea of white apartheid in South Africa. They're trying to divide people in Western culture based on myths like the gender pay gap. They're trying to divide cultures based on ideas of like cultural appropriation, for example, on ideas of hate speech, on ideas of abortion rights, on ideas of religion like Christianity, pitting Muslims against Christians. They're trying to make people fight each other on ideas of employment or employment opportunity by importing cheap labor through these immigrants. Uh, they have these no-go zones abroad. And so a lot of what we're seeing, the immigration issue at the borders, particularly in America, the Yellow Vest protests in France, what you're starting to see is kind of a revolt to this kind of these movements by the globalists to try to kind of connect the whole world into a into a one world government. And so what you're seeing is this kind of revolt from the people coming back and saying, okay, well, we don't really necessarily agree with this kind of push for a one world society. We think that this is not in our best interest. And the fact of the matter is, people aren't going to step up to the plate until it affects them personally, until it affects their own lives. So really, what it takes is people feeling like they don't have another option. People feeling like they can't really get away from the higher taxes like the people are in France. And that's why they're kind of revolting, and they're coming back and they're saying, no, 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 no. We're not going to allow this. We're not going to let this just kind of happen to our country. We're going to fight back, and we're not just going to let it be a thing that happens. So a lot, I think, of what we see is the people doing just that, and the people fighting back, and the people saying, no, 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 not in my country, not anymore, which is great, which is a good thing. It's great. It really is. We could use more people, getting up there and saying, hey, we're not about this. But a lot of people are normies. A lot of people don't follow politics. They don't know what's going on. And a lot of people still, for example, don't believe in 9/11. They still don't believe that it's an inside job, even though the evidence for that is very clearly, obviously, that it was a false flag. In fact, there's even a suit that's going on against, I believe it's against the government for the story, for about the official story. So I think one court decided to take on one legal office decided to take up the charge. And so we're seeing traction there on that case, on that front, which is interesting. But I kind of really just want to focus on the one issue, which is that we can clearly see that this sort of globalist plot is certainly a global phenomenon, where we have elites from all over from every Western society pushing these Marxist ideologies. Just recently, there was a poll saying how many American college students believe in the freedom of speech. And the survey said that, or believe that, not all speech should be free. And I think the results were 41% of college students did not believe in necessarily free speech. That's huge. And it speaks to the brainwashing in America that students don't really understand why we have free speech in America. And there's a whole dumbing down of, American citizens as well, where we have these institutions in some cases run by feminists, where gender studies, for example, is all about man bashing. It's all about feminism. It's all about the people of color being brought down, and very little of these classes don't teach some kind of politically motivated slant towards life. No, in fact, they're all this kind of um, pushing in the other direction, where it's all about, hey, this is what's real and this is what's not real and this is what you need to know, and repeat my stance back to me, or you're gonna fail this class. Because there have been stories of people who've been in these classes who come out and they say, hey, I was in this class and I spoke up once and everyone in the class attacked me, even my classmates, for having a different opinion, because I supported conservatism, because I supported President Trump. And that's the society we live in, where it's a fascist society who says they are fighting against fascism. It's incredible. It's dangerous. It's quite frankly scary. I wouldn't want to live in this society, and I only see the rhetoric ramping up from here. The good news is, though, that a lot of people are turning around and looking at CNN. They're looking at MSNBC. They're looking at the Huffington Post, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and they're saying these organizations are throwing out a bunch of nonsense, and we shouldn't be listening to them because they're not sharing real news. They're sharing opinion pieces. They're activists who work here, and there's this kind of propaganda that's just flying through this. And so people, I think, are starting to wake up, which is great. But again, in America, we're starting to see, and a lot of other countries too, that conservatism is being revitalized in people's lives and people's minds. We're moving away from this kind of Marxist system, this modernist system where people are secular. They believe in secular institutions. People are going back and putting their faith back in religion, putting their faith back in God. People are rejecting globalism. They're saying, okay, well, this is clearly not good for us, and it's not. And so I think, President Trump brought in a lot of that idea, a lot of the idea of, okay, well, what if a country was focused on its own growth, on its own development, on its own interest, completely opposite to what a globalist would want. And so when that happens, everyone attacks him. Look at, if you want to see how much power globalists have, look at the sheer number of media corporations, because the media really shapes a lot of what people think, a lot of the culture. Look at how the media, what percentage of the media in the mainstream was producing negative press on Trump. It was over 90% at one point. And we're talking 90% of the media. And so when we look back and we see, well, the media is really owned by 6 companies. Wow. That means that these globalists have a lot more control than we thought. And if you doubt that, try walking down the street of any metropolitan area wearing a MAGA hat and see what happens to you. See if you don't get slurs. See if someone doesn't try to run up and punch you in the face. If you were in Ireland, you'd probably get a milkshake thrown at you like Michael Farage is doing as part of as it happened to Michael Farage, who's helping promote the Brexit party in the UK. So we have a lot of kinds of things, a lot of kind of developments that are happening in the US and abroad, which is great to see. I mean, this is like, okay, we're making progress. People are waking up. My fear is that, while some people are going to wake up, you're always going to have the mass of people who don't believe in any of these things because they don't really do the research. For example, they don't believe in really, they don't really understand what a globalist is. They don't understand what uh, happened in 9/11. A lot of people don't care, to be honest, because they really want to live their lives. That's all they care about. And that's the great majority of people. And you know what? To be honest, rightly so. I mean, we ourselves kind of live in a little bit of a bubble. Um, even though it sucks that we do, uh, that's just how it is. I mean, a lot of people really don't understand that there's really a war going on here between spiritual powers. Uh, so, I think the most good that we can do, and I'll keep saying this, I'm going to keep saying it, is more people need to get involved. More people need to get kind of integrated online. More people need to get behind mics. More people need to start new businesses, start jobs, and you can do a lot of that without a lot of upfront capital. You can, for example, open up an e-commerce store and start selling things online. That's what I'm doing. Uh, you can, and you can just drop ship stuff too. You don't even have to have the inventory. In other words, you don't have to pay a huge upfront cost. Um, so we could do that. I mean, listen, we need to look towards the future, get ourselves involved in something, do something that matters. And I think that one of really the best ways to do that is to kind of look around and say, well, what can I do that'll benefit me in society, as opposed to what am I doing that can kind of not, because you think about it like, well, what do I really do with my free time? And some people really want to get involved. They want to find ways to contribute to their societies. And they're looking for a good way to do that. And a lot of people don't really know, okay, well, I could try this or I could try that, but I don't really know what I would do if I could do something. But we need that. We really do. I mean, we need people who are going to be serious about the cause, and people who are going to, and it's not even that you have to do crazy things. It's just being someone who is talking about it with a mic, or writing stories, or having conversations with people that you see, that your friends, and kind of talk to them about it, and kind of, sharing bits of information, uh, carpooling to a voting station. The most good that people can do is really at the local level. Because you see things like the development of 5G across the nation, and you see in the United States, you see all these city councils, all these town halls, all these um, local level institutions pushing 5G without really having any research on the health effects, on the health concerns. And listen, if 5G really goes up and it really gets connected, it is going to be hell for the average citizen. And I really mean that when I say that. That not as hyperbole. It is a dangerous, dangerous technology. And if we allow those towers to go up all around us, we're going to see cancer rates explode. We're going to see people in really harmful situations. The sheer radiation that it gives off is very toxic to the human body. And so the more that we can learn about 5G, the more that we can learn about all of these other things that are kind of going on in our society, educating ourselves to be able to do something about that, the better off we'll be. Because, I mean, let's face it, what else are we doing with our lives, to have something to work towards, to have something to kind of spread the message about, to really get involved, to do something, I think would certainly be in our best interest, just as members of humanity, just as members of society. It matters. That kind of stuff's important. So, you do what you can. And also, I think that when I'm going to segue over to the next topic here. Uh, I have here behind me. I have this huge stack of games I used to play. I have DS games back there, Vita games for the PlayStation Vita, uh, PlayStation 3 games. I have a bunch of stuff. I've been playing games my whole life. Um, and it's been fun. I've had a lot of fun with it. Starting a couple of years ago, I really couldn't kind of play the games. Like, really couldn't, like, for whatever reason. Because I don't know what it is, man. I just get bored. I'd be like, yeah, I'm not feeling it. I'm not, really engaged or invested in this really to the same degree that I used to be. And that sucks, but it's like, you can only do so much. I mean, at some point, it all starts to feel the same. There's not really a huge variation in what you really do. I mean, you play 5 RPGs. I mean, you pretty much played every RPG. There's not really like too different. I mean, the stories can only vary so much, right? But so I try to play it. I try to get back into it, but um, I really see games. It's not that games are an escape. A lot of people use them as a way to avoid stress, to kind of deal with stress, to kind of deal with things that are hard, things that are difficult in life sometimes just for fun, sometimes for just for a way to relieve stress. But the thing with um games, and the thing with a lot of other technologies, is that they allow you to kind of see, they get a bad rap, and that's really the thing, is that, do a lot of people play more games than they should? Yeah. um but that doesn't make the games necessarily bad. That's more of a self-control kind of thing. But also, when you look at the way the men are being treated today, what who's giving men the permission to be men anymore? It's kind of like, well, what should I do with my free time? Because, the economy's really pushed down our wages with respect to inflation. So we don't have a lot of money going around. So I can't spend a lot of money. Uh, I'm pretty much being told by society that I suck because I'm a man. Um, I want to do something that's kind of meaningful or purposeful, or something that makes me feel like I can have a purpose or a meaning or something to work towards. So what should I do? And for a lot of guys, uh, it's easy to get into a virtual world and kind of explore that. I mean, and to kind of allow your inner guy, your inner man, to kind of come out through that medium, to kind of share it in that way. And so you do, and it's fun, and you have a good time, and that's a lot of what guys like to do, is kind of have that kind of goal oriented uh, adventure. And so we do it through that because it's easier. Um, but it's not just that it's easier, it's kind of like it's the only outlet where society isn't gonna kind of judge us for where we are in our lives. It's like, well, I'm gonna play this game because I can fail in this game and it won't be laughed at. I know that I'll still have um something to do after the game. If I fail in this game, no one's gonna laugh at me. I'm gonna be able to learn from that and come back and be better the next time. Um, and the game is like, I can make progress at my own pace. I can really play the story how I want to, and there doesn't have to be this other person there to tell me. There can be if I want to play it online, but I think the medium is very interesting in that way. Um, but then the other side of it is that, well, a lot of people waste time. A lot of guys waste their lives doing this, and that's where the other side of it comes in, where it can be used, unfortunately, as kind of um, a way to deal with stress, or a way to deal with all the things that suck. Or for some people, it's really just their hobby. Like, this is really just what I like to do. It's what I like to spend my time doing. I have a good time when I do it. And I mean, that's it. I'm not trying to please you. I'm not trying to please anybody. This is just what I like to do. It's fun. And that's really catching on with people, especially online games. Because when you look at, I play a decent amount of League of Legends. Um, when you have, especially, see, the online thing is interesting because a lot of people are moving online. A lot of people kind of want to, um, it's kind of become like a social hub for guys, particularly to kind of get together and kind of get to spend time together without necessarily like meeting up. In other words, you can kind of hang out without having to spend a lot of money. Um, you can kind of just, do what you just can kind of just hang out, kind of just share, you know, sharing each other's company, make jokes, kind of just go back and forth in that way. And it's cool and it's fun, and you have a good time when you do it. And for and that's a totally legitimate way for two guys to connect. Because I mean, when you really think about it, how often are you going to go and see someone down the street, and go and kind of hang out with them and kind of do you're not really, not that often. Um, and so the game serves as kind of like that medium where you get the opportunity to do that without having to be there to do it. Um, so you get that from the game. And it's fun, and it's cool, and it's nice, and it's a good time, and you get to have that. Uh, and so yeah, and so then that's a part of the experience as well. And so when you're not, playing the games or doing the things, well, then you say, okay, well, then what else do I have that I can really kind of do right now that's not, playing a game or like do this. And it's interesting because I was reading about a statistic that came out recently that was talking about kind of this generation, the millennial generation. And one of the most interesting things about millennials is that a lot of them live with their parents. So much so, partly because of the debt, partly because of their lack of skill set in an advanced economy where a higher level of skill set is desired, in a place where a larger portion of the applicant pool already have college degrees. So it's kind of more like, well, the college degrees become the new high school diploma in a way. But it's also become a bad deal because the debt associated with a bachelor's degree is much, much greater, partially because of inflation, partially because of the government's step in terms of giving out loans for colleges, giving out more bigger loans. The cost of college has risen exponentially to the point where, in my university in particular, it was increasing at a rate of 3% every year, which may not sound like a lot, but what do you think 3% of $60,000 is? And what happens when that compounds every year? That's an incredible, right? So I think college is really becoming an increasingly bad deal for a lot of people. But not only that, you look at the degrees that people are getting from university. They're getting the a lot of people are walking away with the, what's that degree? Gender studies, these sociology degrees that aren't really teaching people anything. They're kind of degrees that, I mean, are really useless. They don't kind of give you much in terms of, okay, well, now I understand this, or now I understand that, or, it's really not. But to be honest, a lot of college is that way. Back in my university, I remember one of the professors talking and saying how most of the students don't it was a business professor at my school, and he was telling this group of freshmen, he was like, listen, he's like, if you really want to learn how to start a business, he's like, go start one right now. He's like you're better off dropping out of school and starting a new business to really learn business than to sit here and get a degree for it. And hell, he was right. I mean, look at most of the billionaires. They're all self-made people who don't have college degrees, and there's a reasoning behind that, and especially now at a time when a college degree is an increasingly bad deal, and every year you wait, it's becoming an even worse deal than it was the last year. When you look at that statistic that said over 40% of college students kind of aren't, sure what uh, don't believe in free speech. That's insane. I think that's crazy. And it's kind of like, well, why am I sending my kid to this university? Because he's not learning anything. He'd be better off. I may as well, send him to an electrician school or send him to kind of like a trade school. And to be honest, I 100% agree. I think trade schools are not only a much, much better deal, but they're intrinsically, I think, useful because you learn real skills, you learn real things that you can use. Let me tell you, honestly, college, you're not going to learn anything, not anything of measurable use. College for me was like really just high school part two. It's just a bunch of memorization of abstract ideas, which is fine. I mean, it's nice to have your kind of your brain tickled a little bit, but there's only so much that you can do in the manner of I want you to learn this and recite it to me. At some point ideas need to be executed upon, and college just quite frankly is the place you go to hang out and have fun. I mean that's all it was, for the most part. uh, and that's how it is, unless you're going for like, okay, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a profession that really requires you to have the degree. Then it's like, well, okay, this is a rite of passage for that. But otherwise, it's like if you're going to school and you're going to get a generic degree and you haven't decided what you want to do and what you want to major in, well, then it's a really bad idea. I and I say that quite frankly because of the cost associated with it. I say it because it's just not a good. It's just it's like, what is there for you there? The one thing that I will say that I did pick up in college were good friends. I think I learned more about myself in college than I did really, on my off time, just hanging out with people than I ever learned in the classroom. And that's sad, and it's like, well, it's almost like I think the college mentality is that you get your degree, or the lie. Here's the lie that's been told: is that you'll get your degree and then you graduate, and then all of a sudden everything will be fine and you'll be like, you know, handy dandy. Everything will be great. That's not how it is, and it's getting worse every single year with the cost rising. College is not enough for you to get a job in the 21st century unless you want to work at ShopRite, where it might even start to become a minimum requirement. That's how ridiculous things are getting economically. Um, I think that if you want to get a job, if you want to get any job of any substance, um, I'm more of an entrepreneurial type, so I naturally lean and am biased towards that position. But I would say, start your own, because when you look at it's especially now, because when you look at the advent of something like the internet, you have so much more of an opportunity to be able to create something with very little upfront cost, with programs that really do a lot of the legwork for you. For example, if I wanted to open up a florist shop tomorrow, I can source products from China, throw up ads on Facebook, and I don't even have to put down money for the inventory. And I can open it up on a shop like through an e-commerce website like Shopify, where the templates are already there. All I have to do is source my products, and there's even an automation tool for that. So really what I'm trying to tell you is that this whole process has already been streamlined, where you can start to make money. And that's just one of the avenues, and it's online, and you can set it up in like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. To be completely honest, you could have this whole pipeline and already start to have products selling, already start to have everything done in a matter of like a day, in a matter of like 8-10 hours, just because. And that's on the high end, because it's really not that bad, but that's like with as much of these little kind of a fair amount of tweaking along the way. And that's to say that it's really that simple in the 21st century. And you could do it with you have $200-300 and you put another like $50 every week or something like that, just to get a small amount of traction going. You start to put in, you start to put a little bit more every week, $100, $150, $200 a week or something like that. And what is that, like $800 a month or something like that? And yeah, that's a lot for some people. But when you think about yourself as like okay, I'm 18, I'm 19 years old, I just graduated high school, I want to do something with my life. Well, there you go. That's the way. Because you, not only is it significantly cheaper than going to university, like laughing, it's like hysterically so, but the opportunity for success, the treasure that awaits you if you are successful, and even just the time, the time cost is exponentially greater. I mean, there's just no competition there. We're talking about a situation where you're your own employer. You work your own hours. All you really need is a computer, so you can do it wherever you want to. You don't have to be in debt to do it. Even a small side gig working at a shop will fund it. And so it's like, well, that's a pretty good gig, and it only really takes one selling product to really fund the rest of it. Anyway, I'm a believer. Okay, I'm a believer in e-commerce. I'm a believer of internet-based businesses because they work. Because there's really an opportunity there that doesn't require significant amounts of investment into physical products or physical, labor and things like that. What's going to happen tomorrow if, the government decides at the local, the state, or whatever level, decides, okay, we're gonna increase property taxes. Well, now if I have this inventory and I have it stored in or if I have an office space, I have to worry about the business tax, and I have to worry about the increased, whatever property tax. And, like with the $15 minimum wage that a lot of restaurants had to lay off workers about for, you don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff, God willing, because the internet's even an entire beast in that way as well. So, there's a lot of there's a lot of nuance, like a lot of like these new, like interesting things. So I don't know. I would that's what I would do. But in terms of like the average everyday person, or like why they'd even go in, and so that's really why. And so really people play. Okay, now I'm gonna go back and segue back. And so now really people play a lot of like games, really to relax. It's really just that, and that's all it is. It's just a way to kind of blow off steam. And so yes, some people play it because it's like these games are they're a way for me to relax. They're cool. They're fun. I have a good time. And yes, a lot of people, honestly, I would say a fair amount of people do it because, well, there's nothing else to do. I mean, we've created a society where kind of a lot of people, don't really even talk to each other. They kind of just hang out in their own personal spaces. And I'm like that to a large extent. So I'm not gonna call out other people. But I'm just trying to say it how it is. And so a lot of people are like that, and I think a lot of that is because of social media. It's because of, I think, the fear mongering, a lot that happens in the media, where they kind of push these ideas of, oh, this person died. That's all you really see on the news. There's all this terrible negativity about people dying all the time. And that kind of colors your experience of life. And so you kind of take from that what you will, and you kind of say, okay, well, the world is a scary place where bad things happen. And so I need to be careful and find a way to protect myself, because this stuff's crazy. I don't know what I'll be doing next week. I don't know what I'll be doing next month. I don't know if I'll be alive. So, I can't talk to Joe Schmo down the street. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get embarrassed. But it's even to the point where a lot of people, at least in New York, you really don't see people kind of hanging out in their porches, hanging out in their in their driveways, with the kind of those lawn chairs. That doesn't really happen. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the culture is just different. The culture is more about materialism, but it's also more about kind of this idea of vanity in showing, or an artificially created life online that is better than the life that you're actually living. And people kind of trying to one up each other, but also social media where now you have the YouTube and you have the Netflix and you have all these entertainment sources. It kind of becomes, well, the Tinder, for example, like I can just get whatever I want uh, as an instant gratification trick. And so I actually don't need to invest much effort into relationships because, listen, relationships are hard. And then on top of that, you have the attack on men where, men are being told they're toxic, that they can't really express themselves. And so you grow up with a society of men who are nice guys, men who don't really have never been taught because they haven't had a proper role model. And also they've been trained by society to kind of be, I don't want to say subservient, but to be to not stand up for themselves, to not be assertive, or to not be, and I'm guilty of that too to some extent. So I'm not trying to point out like, oh, you guys are, but and a lot of that I think has to do with social. Not it's not just the social construct, right? That this idea of this is what a man was supposed to be, um, but a part of it's also the way that men are raised now. I think most homes don't have fathers, and I think that that's not entirely the man's fault. I really don't. I think that it's about really a lot about the culture that's been created, that's had a hatred for men, court systems that have been designed against men, the proliferation of things like birth control, uh, the poverty that's been raised in certain countries, in certain metropolitan areas because of government sticking their hands in the cookie jar and trying to say, okay, well, we'll make this better. We're gonna do a fight on drugs, a fight on war, a fight on homelessness, which has actually created more homelessness and increased the number of drugs that people are taking, increased the incarceration rates. So it's just a mess. It's a mess. Listen, a lot of these things are very complicated. There's so many factors that play into so many of these things. It's not, like when you want to look at the family and you want to look and you want to say men are toxic and it's men's fault that, a lot of people that, a lot of, single parent families happened. Well, no, actually it's not. There's a lot of reasons why, and it's a very ignorant position to say, well, it's because of this, it's because of that. It's because of a lot of different factors. Usually, it is, right? There's a lot of different things that go into these things, into determining, how a person is or why they believe the things that they believe. And so, yeah, right. So, um, and the other interesting thing that we see is how society is kind of going back and moving into a more postmodern era where people are kind of going back to religion and they're kind of starting to reject the secular nature of society today. So it's great, I think, to see a cultural shift back to a Christian Judeo system where people are now saying, okay, well, abortion, I don't know if I agree with that, because Alabama just recently passed, for example, an abortion ban. Well, it was really an abortion ban bill. It's still allowed for abortion, I think, or one or two different kind of circumstances, but for the most part, it's saying, okay, listen, no more. Okay, we need to stop this, and there's a lot of Democratic backlash. But the last time they did a poll with the general population about the issue of abortion, a lot of people are becoming pro-life because a lot of people are realizing, hey, maybe having ninth month abortions where the baby is perfectly viable outside the womb is not a good idea. Maybe it's a little selfish to think that, oh, well, I need to protect my rights, even though I wasn't responsible enough to not engage in certain relations with people that I wouldn't want to reproduce with. Maybe the onus is actually on me because I should have been more responsible and have made better decisions in my own life than to engage in momentary whatever. And so it's very exciting to see that people are kind of going back and they're saying, okay, well, actually this doesn't sit right with me. And I think it's very good. And I talked about this earlier in one of the videos because I think it's very good because it shows, people aren't just kind of taking in whatever they're being fed. People are smart and they're paying attention and they're seeing the things that are happening and they're saying, I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with the abortion thing. I'm not okay with the lies surrounding this kind of Russian conspiracy that's been peddled for 2 years. I kind of want to get to the root of what real things and real topics and kind of want to have engaging. It's like why people listen to the Joe Rogan because they want to be involved in complex, kind of long form discussions with people from different walks of life because they want to kind of, have something to kind of munch on or chew on or think about. And that says something about the population. I mean, we're talking about, I think the a podcast that's gotten, I think I don't know if it was over the lifetime or how many he gets monthly, but I'm talking about a podcast that's had 150 million uh, people listen to, and that's insane. I mean, we're actually talking about a percentage of the entire world's human population listens to Joe Rogan. An actual percentage of that's incredible. We're talking about, I mean, that's such an incredible sway. I mean, for Joe Rogan to come out here and say he believes in this now, he can feed an idea to almost 200 million people. That's greater than the size of, and so it's crazy because the reach you can get through the internet is now like insane. When you look at like PewDiePie, for example, has over 90 million subscribers, and stuff like that. So it's crazy. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, over the interwebs for a lot of kind of engagement. There's a lot still to be made there in terms of e-commerce, and we're talking about $1 trillion markets, so on and so forth. So with that, guys, we'll end it here. I'll try to keep these to about an hour. Try to keep them at an hour about every time. But so we'll end it here, and we'll pick up tomorrow. So with that, guys, take it easy. If you liked this, share it with your friends, share the podcast, share the video, like the video, because that really helps. Sharing it is probably the way that you can help the most, because that allows for the maximum amount of exposure. But even just liking it, putting a comment, really helps us with YouTube in terms of getting the message out there and pushing it out to more and more people. So, anything like that you can do is going to be greatly appreciated. So, don't shy away from that. So with that, guys, we'll see you in the next one. Take it easy. Peace.